Welcome to the Collingwood Rant, round 13 episode. I'm Sly.
And we're back in contention. Ha 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 ha. Spook.
Spook,
Yes.
what did what did you think of the selections going into this game? Flynn Appleby selected above,
Stevenson.
yes.
Um, Look, if I had to be pragmatic, you would say that based on the scratchy, matchy information we've been receiving, Appleby had deserved his call up a few weeks ago. Um, they obviously think that at the time Steph was ahead of him, so they persisted with him, and now he was given a chance. So I was okay with that one. What else you got for me?
I still, you got Josh Thomas in that equation also, so I'm surprised Josh Thomas is surviving. His form still hasn't been great. He's shown probably little flashes. He's actually on, I think, 97, 98 games, so I suspect they're going to get him to 100, and then
For
they'll ditch him.
potential father sons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
What else? What
uh,
else would you keep him?
Mason
No,
Cox
yeah,
came
well,
back.
yeah, Josh Thomas, I'm not a fan of, but anyway, we're not going to linger on him anymore. We're going to talk about Coxie.
Coxie came back. Levi Greenwood came back from doing his knee, when was it, like last week? Uh, and who else did we have in? Chris Mayne came back. What a shock. Did you see that Chris Mayne might come back?
In case of emergency, break glass, and Maney's just sitting there behind the glass.
And Jordan Roughhead also came back. So we went in with an extremely tall team. I think you had a stat on that.
Yeah. Do you want to just play some mood
No.
music while I bring that back up again? Just give me 1 second. Talk amongst
Da
yourselves.
da 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 da
Smoke it. No,
da da da. Oh, sorry, it's the
don't
wrong
preempt
song.
the victory next week. Now I'm under pressure. Hang on a second.
Oh, so you're doing it.
Mason Cox, Darcy Cameron, Darcy Moore, Brody Grundy, and Jordan Rufford playing tonight for Collingwood. First game, first time a VFL AFL side has had 5 2-metre tall players in one side.
It's good that it
It was worth
qualifies
the
that
wait.
we're.
I'm glad you all persisted with us
Yeah.
there. There was 20 minutes of your life you're never getting back, but just wait for the next 30.
I'm just glad they qualify that, like, we're effectively half a VFL side. I know, people say he's referring to VFL history. No, it's because we're half a VFL side. So went into this game.
And that's being generous.
North's got like half the team out.
A bit
They
more
look
than half.
terrible.
Actually, there was a point, and I'm not going to use this as too much of a super excuse because we are decimated by injuries as well. But North would actually, when they listed their injury list, they are fucking gutted, and that would explain why we were playing the under 19 development side tonight. Has it been
Yeah,
kind?
and it seems that Reshaw's going a little bit with youth also. So
I don't think
some
that's
more
by choice
inexperience.
though.
He's got people like Jared Pollock sitting in the reserves or whatever you call the
Yeah,
next tier down now.
I think being shit's got
Uh,
something to do with that as well though.
I think he's trying to send a message about where they're looking for the future. I mean, regardless, they feel that a young, inexperienced side. The first half was, I don't know, it feels redundant to say we played ugly football for a half, but here we
Half of the
are,
course, I think, would be a more accurate term.
and you get to this thing of, and this really frustrates me again, the mindlessness going forward. I don't know what the plan is anymore. It's insane that we overpossess and then just blindly bomb it. And, the punters will say, hey, Coxie should have taken marks or whatever. It's like no one's going to prosper under that lack of system. I shouldn't say the lack of system because there is no system. North were very spirited. Umpiring was terrible. Our second half, I don't know what the instruction was. It was a slippery game, but the instruction might have been, let's just propel the ball forward as often as we can instead of over possessing it. And we seem to play with a lot more run and a bit more purpose. There's a lot of soccers going forward, a lot of taps that we just punch the ball forward. And by doing this and getting a bit of run, we actually looked like a half-competent side.
Yeah, I think conversely, though, I think we tried to do that in the first half. It just didn't work as well because the skills were just so deploringly bad. But there was a stat I texted you that at halftime that Lynch said about. I think there was something about from the time, usually on average, where we will take a mark and we'll look to move the ball forward. We probably average about 25% of the time we just play on immediately. But in that game, we were clearly up around about 60%, which says that their instruction was as soon as you get possession of the ball, no matter where you are, try and move it forward. And that worked, I don't think, particularly greatly for us in the first half. So it actually worked to our detriment more often than not, because a lot of the time that, as much as you can harry the ball up to the forward line, our delivery in there is still diabolical, and our structure in that forward line was almost non-existent. So that strategy, it would work if you had something there on the receiving end. If you're going to have that chaotic movement to get it from one end of the ground to the other, there's going to be something there at the end that equates to kicking a goal, and we just didn't look like we were anywhere near it in the first half. Second half, just before you jump in with your counter argument, is I think that was more of an example of where North just completely, not tired, but whatever they were doing, they just couldn't sustain, and we got the dominance, because technically we are the better side, though we didn't really show that equitably in the first half. But it just became, I think post that, it became more of a realistic representation of where two struggling sides are at, and we were the better of the struggling sides, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, in terms of our system, it's really, again, I mean, we've said this ad nauseum, but it's really reminiscent of the way they played about 4 years ago. Going to the scuttlebutt from 3 or 4 years ago, where we heard, I don't want to name names, we heard that they were overcoached and over-instructed, and it was too confusing to the players to adhere to these complicated structures. And what they did in 2018 was they really pared it back and made it a lot simpler. But it seems now that it's an overly complicated way we play, where there's just too much possession and you're giving the ball to people who shouldn't be trusted with it. And the problem is, and I'll give you an example of Chris Mayne, where he won the ball on the half back, I think it was, in the third quarter, and he handballed to the side bottom under pressure from 2 North Melbourne players. And immediately side bottom had to just get rid of it because he would have been pinged. But by getting rid of it and having a panicked disposal, he put someone else in the panicked position. And it all started this chain because Mayne did not take responsibility and just wanted to lay off with a simple disposal. And they do that too often, where the instruction must be, have another disposal, whatever the hell you want. But those people are just putting teammates under pressure, and then that starts a chain reaction which totally unravels, and then it just goes all to shit. And it's really painful to watch. I mean, I easily tonight could have just stopped watching the game.
You say that every week.
It's getting close to actually happening for real. It's really not encouraging. And you get this...
I'll just interject for a second there, though. To be fair and to balance out, I mean, we are exceptionally better at it than most. But the state of the rest of the competition is in a similar bind. It's very difficult to watch most games at the moment. It's just insanely insane. Like I watched a little bit of the... and I was a Johnny come lately to this one. I came in, I think, I've watched, like most games these days, I'll follow the scores on the phone. If it looks like it's going to be a close one, I'll jump on the TV and give a look at the last maybe 20 minutes. And this was the Adelaide Cats game on the weekend. And I've turned on at just the right time to see that every single contest had about 30 blokes around the ball, and all within a couple of metres of the ball. And all they did was just take possession, just try and throw it out at someone who would then be tackled, the ball would spill to the ground, or it'd be handballed out. And it was just this endless amount of just... It's like watching the Tasmanian Devil from the Roadrunner cartoons. Was it Roadrunner? No, it wasn't Roadrunner cartoons. Who was the Tasmanian Devil in? You know, the one with Foghorn and it was just that, whenever he got together, it was just that, whatever it was. But it was just this massive whirlwind that he turned in, and legs and arms were flying out of it. It just reminded me of that. There was no system there other than the fact it was just really just a case of chance, and that's what football has now essentially become. There's not a lot of strategy that's around it. It's just a pure dumb-ass luck enables you to spill the ball out and you run free. And this isn't a good look for the rest of the competition. It's not a good look for the game. It's not a good look going forward. But, I think you can easily say that this year and COVID and all that sort of nonsense on top of this has become the reason why. But I think this is also trouble brewing in River City, that the game is getting seriously ugly to the point where it's hard to watch.
All right, well, the thing with Collingwood is we were doing this last year. Form deteriorated, system deteriorated, and we were covering it with brief spurts.
You keep bringing it back to Collingwood. What's wrong with you?
Well, the thing...
You're obsessed with this club.
So how true is our second half form? Is it like encouraging and something that can give you confidence of the future, or is it that we're playing the 17th place team?
I think that's pretty much it. It's the latter. That we're playing the 17th place team, and we just had the little bit of the better poor skills. The poorer of the skills was with North, and the better of the poorer skills with us, and we capitalised on that. And some of it, it's hard to read about why our fall from grace has been so prominent. Now, some of it's obviously got to do with injuries and all the other excuses that we rattle out each week. But there's something there that's fundamentally broken at the club. That's, and the trouble is with this week is the win is going to now paper over some of those cracks for another week. I'll state it now, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, I guess, when we talk about the upcoming weeks. I think we just watched our last win for the year. Now, some of me hopes to be wrong. Some of me, because I really do want to get that better pick, hopes that I'm right and that we don't progress any further. Because if you took today what you watched into a final, how quick would that game be over, do you think?
We would have totally been smashed in the first quarter.
Yep. And if that's the case, then what's the point in actually getting there? What are you achieving by getting there and getting humiliated? And look, I'm speculating at the best of times. I don't know that this is set in stone. I have a gut feel that says that I'm probably right, but mine's just an opinion in a sea of opinions. But if this is the case now, why progress with what we're doing? Because it's not working. It's not going to work in a final. It's not going to win as games in a final. It's not going to win as a flag. What's the sense in living this lie any further? And that's not, a silly reaction based on the fact that we won a game today. We won a game. What did we win by? About 5 or 6 goals in the end?
5 goals.
Yeah, I don't think that's a great win in any stretch of the imagination. Look, if we were a serious side against who we played tonight, we should have won by 100 points, and we should have done it in a canter. But we had to work hard for that. The game broke open after halftime. But again, as I said before, I think that's more to do with North not being able to maintain what they've got with their under-19 side. We battled with a whole bunch of little kids as well, but we had a lot of experience in that. I think that helped a fair bit today. But ultimately, though, it's not a great example of what this club needs to be to win a flag from here. Is always going to be my point moving forward.
Well, okay, so just before we move on, you have a handful of players who I think really are the catalyst to get this team going. Taylor Adams is one. He tries his guts out, puts his body on the line, and he constantly tries to make things happen.
There will be a theme here with the players you're going to talk about, I reckon. But anyway,
Levi Greenwood
has
been out for about 112 years, and he came back and immediately added hardness and grunt.
Grunt rhymes with...
Yeah,
grunt.
And Maynard is another one. He's not somebody pushed up into the engine room rather than Crisp, who they, keep trying to move further afield. Those are the sort of guys this club needs.
Absolutely agree.
There's a lot of guys tonight. Josh Thomas, obviously, has been a whipping boy for a little while. Travis Varco, I thought, had a shocker. I could be wrong.
No, it was pretty bad.
I thought, and I wasn't really paying full attention, but I thought Tom Phillips had a better game, but in the end, I found he's only had 9 disposals.
No, I don't agree with you. I thought he really was... He had maybe 1 or 2 moments of okay. The rest of it was terrible.
Yeah, I'm not going to fight for it. Chris Mayne, defensive...
majestic.
Defensively. He's terrible offensively. He's a liability offensively.
He's pretty offensive these days.
And then you get people like Hoskin Elliott had 19 possessions, but they tend to come in on the back of others doing that grunt work. Jamie Erd, I thought like it was quite a sort of game. Flynn Appleby was an interesting choice. I thought it was a game where 90 came into it, but, again,
I think that was
I
more
saw a bit of,
indicative of North's demise, though, at that point, though,
yeah.
too.
You look at I was watching a little bit of the Richmond Essendon game, and that Irvin Mosquito came on, kicked 2 goals, immediately looked lively, and that's his first game. And I think this is the sort of player we're missing, an exciting small forward with X factor. And we're constantly going with the solid citizens like, Josh Thomas and so forth. So I just think the chemistry of the side is wrong. I'll give it a little bit of a shout out to Jack Magden, who I thought was pretty good.
No, yep, I don't disagree, but, that's more indicative of... Can you name anyone in North's forward line tonight?
That Sherry, whatever
Sherry,
his name is.
because he's got the world's most bizarre spelt name. That's the only reason you know him as much as I do.
And Darcy Moore had a really good game. Roughhead was solid. So I think, I said this, I think, a couple of weeks ago. I think the thing with Magden is if he's the 5th, 6th defender, I think that's a good place for him to sort of come up. If you're putting him on the 1st or 2nd best forward, then you're really struggling and he's going to struggle. But I think there's something there to work with. But, there's too many guys in his team, and we've said it for a while, they just aren't putting in enough, or they aren't winning enough of the ball, or they aren't providing enough of a linkage, or they're not providing enough of a finish. And who are we going to get back? You're going to get back possibly De Goey. I don't think you're going to get back Howe. So you're going to lose side bottom now. And it's interesting when I read social media, when I have time to do it, there's 2 schools of thought. One is this club's rooted. That's where we are. And the other is we're rooted by injuries, but when we get those players back, things are good. So you obviously stand in the former camp, but the club's just rooted.
Look, I've got a little bit. Look, I've probably got a toe in the other one, but I think we've ran our race with this particular incarnation of this. I still think that there is a great young spine there, and a little bit of pain. A year or two of a mini rebuild could see us being very competitive again. But you're not going to achieve anything with the status quo at the moment. And I don't think, and the other issue with that is that I don't think, as much as we can sit here and hang hope on the likes of Howe and De Goey and everybody coming back, the reality is that they're not likely to. I mean, how many fucking Collingwood players ever beat the injury timeline? Whoever comes back early.
Well, no one's ever come back. I mean, Goldsack, I guess. But
if we were doing this with the backdrop, I'd be putting tumbleweeds behind us right now.
Well, I think, if they drop out of contention for a year or two, there's a lot more pain, because that's where you're going to start losing guys like Pendlebury, side bottom, Howe, Roughhead, Greenwood.
Think you're on the cusp now where you can't factor them into the next build either, though. They're not. They've had their time in the sun. They're not.
Yeah, but you're not going to replace them in 1 or 2 years.
No, but there has to be a balance of. I don't know. I don't know.
I mean,
I go back to the draft.
If you go back to 2006, where you had Buckley, Burns, Licuri, all those sort of guys heading out, but then you brought in players like Pendles and Daisy, and Swan was coming up, and then you had Willingham, who was a rookie pick, and then you picked up Ball. So you actually had access to top picks to bring in quality options. And those guys got to play, and the segue was seamless. Now, the issue is, where is the segue here, and where is the quality? I guess you could say Stevenson and Goey. Stevenson's barely played midfield, Moore's been there for Moore's
6 years.
But he's not replacing anyone. That's his spot now.
No, but I guess, okay, we're going to take a different tact on the way we see this, but I'll continue.
I'm just looking at you're going to lose players, and you don't have alternatives coming up the way you had 2006 to 2010. So, who are you going to lose from defence? People like Roughhead and Howe. I don't know who's going to come up. Scharenberg's obviously fallen from favour if you can't get a game in the current side. And I'm assuming that line's been drawn for his name. So where are these players coming up? And unfortunately, because of the COVID situation, you don't have a VFL where you could be cultivating these youngsters and giving them serious game time. I mean, those scratch matches, if you ever watch it, they are a farce in terms of using them as grounding for senior football. You know, look at something like Appleby coming up, hasn't played an AFL game, since last year. Similarly with Tim Broomhead, he hadn't played a game in 2 years effectively, and you're expecting to come up from those scratch matches into AFL and to have an impact.
Yep.
It's hard enough coming up from VFL and having an impact. Coming up from those scratch matches, if you're, and I'm not trying to be cruel, but players like Broomhead and Appleby, they're not Rankin or Rowell. They're battlers at the moment. Maybe they've got a higher ceiling, but for players of that potential at this given time to come up from those lower leagues and having an impact, it's just about impossible. So the gap between today and tomorrow is widening because the facility isn't there to cultivate the next generation.
Yeah, a lot of sides can be in the same boat though, but I think, you can look at the way the King brothers have influenced Gold Coast and then the Saints and the Rankins and stuff, is that when you've got the semblance of a good core that's potentially there and you can't factor in your aging stars, that maybe that 1 or 2 years of netting someone there that can have an immediate impact enables those younger players now to become your senior cores in a year or two time, that you can hopefully balance it out. I think the thing is that the old method's probably not going to work now because the dilution of talent is probably at an absolute paramount now. You're not going to get that isolation of core goodness happening at too many clubs, that you've got to capitalise on the best of what you've got now. And that sometimes in the future could be enough. Like I say, I'm not much of a Nostradamus with this stuff, but it sort of feels like we've got, I still think, at my heart of hearts, we have the semblance of a great core in this side. There's some really good, young, talented players there. And there's a number of players that may have, probably only another year or two left in them. You've got to then balance that transition somehow. And that's probably our hardest thing that we need to make happen now is how do we make that next 1 or 2 years of pain become a third year of increased success. I almost think we've got some of the cattle to do it, but then, you can only look at the rest of the competition and say, look, maybe there's some opportunity here that almost good enough is probably going to be good enough in the next couple of years at any rate, because I think that dilution of talent is really, who would you see at the moment would be a dominant side for a number of years? GWS.
Brisbane and Carlton.
Well, I know you love Carlton unequivocally. You might as well start buying their jumpers. You've become such a fan lately. But Brisbane, look, I agree with the Brisbane. I think they're the ones that I always thought would be probably the most threatening. And they're doing it, I guess, with a younger brigade. That maybe that's...
I think Brisbane's ahead of schedule at the moment.
It's a template that I think that we could probably best follow. Blues, I'm not super sure about. I agree with you that they have a very good spine and they have some very seriously good players coming through the rank. I think the difference is, between the two is Teague is such an unknown quantity versus what's his name, the old boy over at Fagan. I think that level ahead could see them clear. I'm not sure. I think probably ultimately, hopefully, that Teague is just not experienced enough to mature them quick enough to be a threat. But they're going to be a good side. There's no doubt about it. They've been down for too long. It's inevitably going to be their time.
The one thing with Carlton, though, and if Teague's not a good coach, the thing is he's getting games into some of these players. I mean, they've had horrid injury runs. Curno's going to miss the whole year. So he's going to be behind in his development, and he has questionable knees. But, their recruiting's been good. Picked up that Jack Martin, Noons, on top of their drafting. So even if Teague is a misfire, I think he's put in enough groundwork in terms of the games he's getting to players that the next coach is going to be able to capitalise on that.
I told you, look, and I hate to admit this in public, and I wash myself every day, but I was at a Carlton function last year, and Charlie Curnow was on my table, and we spoke a little bit about when everyone else did the adulation thing, and I got to speak to him when we talked about football. It was simply a case of what's the difference between Bolton and T? Because at that point they were went from absolutely serial underperformers to looking like they're going to win some games. And he said that the difference in the coaching was down to the fact that Bolton was all about system, structure, process. And he goes, there were concepts that a lot of the playing group just didn't understand, and they really struggled to understand it to the point where they couldn't execute it. And T came in and just said, well, you're all naturally good in this position. You're naturally good in this position. Let's just play to the strengths. And he said from the up and go, that's what everyone started to embrace. And whether that is a long-term sustainable, workable entity, I'm not entirely sure. But there's things around that I actually do subscribe to, that, your best players should be in their best positions is generally where you can garner success. And at the moment, we're just a hodgepodge of where everyone's going to line up from week to week. Again, it comes back to that, the coaching direction, and you can only do what you can do with the cattle you got. But it's just, I don't think that's where we are now. And I'm going to go Buckley bashing in a minute. Is that it's more
Go for it now.
that where he's trying to take us just isn't sustainable anymore with that list. It's time for that break and some fresher ideas to come in and reinvigorate things. Is where I see that as. So when we talk a little bit about that mini rebuild or potentially a rebuild, I don't ever allude to the fact that that's going to be done under Buckley's watch. I think the time there is done. I haven't hidden from that for the last couple of weeks, and I don't see anything changing in the future to make that any different. So I'm also basing the fact that our reinvigorated success with the list has to be at the basis of a new helm, and that's across the board. You look at, I think Gold Coast come out today, and Gold Coast are travelling all right. They've shelved half their support staff in the Great Cull, and I imagine over the next few days/weeks we'll be doing much of the same. But it's scary that the fact that the same olds, the tryhards are still in the same positions. That bothers me just as much as the state of our list.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think this, I don't know what you'd call it, this regression into the way we were playing 3 to 5 years ago. It should be a lot more alarming for people than, the club's hiding behind the injuries or saying injuries. No, I understand the injuries do contribute to the way they're playing, but this systematic breakdown of what they're trying to do. And it's not just this year. I mean, this is the thing. People are going, oh, well, injuries this year and COVID and all that sort of crap. This was happening last year also.
I agree.
So, something's been breaking down there, and they don't seem to be showing the intelligence to course correct it. And I'll look at tonight's game, and as it went on, Mason Cox started coming into it, and he provided them with a bit of structure, but it's really emblematic of this regime that when things don't work, players are dropped. And and this was happening to Dacos last year. I remember he got dropped after North smashed us by 10 goals and Hawthorn beat us by 4 or 5 goals. And I'm looking at those games and thinking, seriously, based on the way the whole team played, how you single this individual out as being person to drop to remedy that downfall, it staggers my mind. And the same thing with Cox. Cox was dropped, and it was like, oh, well, he's not marking, he's not doing this, he's not doing that, he's not hitting our key performance indicators. Like, how the fuck are you moving the ball to him that you're expecting him to do anything? And
Similar, he was more effective tonight. I think he marked one contested ball that resulted in a goal, but the rest of the time it was more, again, that thing that's missing with our absolutely missile command type of entries into the forward line is when he can't mark the ball, it's what he does with it. And there was a couple of times when he knows that he can't mark it, that he tries to push it to someone else's advantage. We don't get that any other week with any other forward.
And the thing I think of Cox too is, he's criticised about going up one-handed too often, but I think he's going up one-handed either because his other arm's being held, which is pretty constant, or he's just such a shit kick that it's really his only option to go up with one handed. But the point I was trying to make is, you know what, your system's breaking down. I don't think he's a forward. I've said this from the day he showed up. I supported him, but like, I don't think he's a forward. But hang on, it's not like he's getting his hands to 10 marks and he's dropping 10 marks. You're delivering the ball with such haphazardness that you're not giving him an opportunity. And then when it's not working, you're turning around going, he's not doing the job required of him. Hang on, your game plan is not doing the job he requires to capitalize on it. And this is what I have as a problem with this side. It's very much, or this regime, when things aren't working, it becomes, all about the brand they're playing and shit like this. We're not working hard enough and all that typical corporate speak when, mate, your system doesn't work. And you're pushing it every week, and you pushed it for 5 years from 2013 to 2018. You pushed it to the point where you're saying, oh, well, that's not the way we want to play and blah, blah. And we saw bits of it here. And it's like, mate, your system doesn't work and it's not sustainable, and it's proven it's not sustainable, and yet we keep trying it. And
it's the definition of insanity, isn't it?
Yeah. And you didn't get it to work for 1 year. For 1 year, you actually did something quite different. You played this a lot more freewheeling, free handballing, running, daring type of game with a mid-sized forward line. And then for some reason you abandoned it. And I don't actually understand why. I don't know if I recall at the start of 2011, they interviewed Mick Malthouse on SEN, and he was talking about adjusting the game plan. I'm sitting there going, what the fuck? Why are you adjusting it? You just want to flag with it. And he was talking about how you had to adapt to the fact that opposition were going to adapt to what you'd been doing. So you had to change it up. And I'm thinking, well, surely that's something you do once it actually happens. It's like he was trying to preempt what was coming. And I don't know if that's what's happened with Collingwood between 2018 and 2019, whether they said, well, we only came within 5 points. We need to preempt the way clubs are going to prepare against us and change things up. But whatever you've done, it's staggered this club and their on-field performances. So we just see sporadic executions of the game plan. So, it comes alive for a little bit, and then you see lots of bad disposal errors and lots of skill errors and all that sort of stuff. And then we just go back around and do it all over again. And watching tonight, I just felt absolute despair. It was like watching a J.J. Abrams movie. I'm sitting there thinking, this is not going to get good. And if it gets good, I know it's not going to last. It's just going to go to shit. And you know what? I have no hope going into next week. You have hope going into next week?
No, like I said, I think we watched today our last win for the year. We may eke out another one. I think, Gold Coast are patchy at the moment. If they get us on the right day, they'll win. But I just don't see anything like that tonight was other than the fact, and I quoted that line from A Few Good Men, where he talks about all we saw today was they just beat up on a weaker kid. And that's how I felt watching the game today. I didn't take any solace out of the win. I didn't take too much joy out of the win. And it's sad to actually think that I remember sitting there thinking, and I hate thinking this, is that, we ultimately are better for the longer game to be losing games. And I hate taking that stance, but this is the system that the AFL have given us. If you want to actually improve quicker, be shit. If you can't make the finals, there's no good finishing ninth. Be the shit as you possibly can and take the rewards and run. And that's where my mindset is at now, that I don't think the side's got a flag in them. We've talked about this every week, and I don't think we need to keep remembering these lines over and over again. But we're just not good enough now. And I don't think we've got even an arsehole's chance of sneaking a flag in this year by even brabbering through the season. The thing is, we've got to address it now. Don't wait another year or two. Just start fixing it now. Acknowledge that you're not good enough, or you're not going to be good enough. Look, probably at the start of the year, maybe we were a chance, but the injury's just decimated, and you're not going to come back from that stuff. You've got to be realistic about the way that these seasons pan out, and I don't think we're close now, and I don't think we're going to be close in the future. So fix it. Start fixing it now. Don't fucking piecemeal together another year next year where you can be an almost Rant. Get to the point where you can be a fucking dominant species again in this competition. Is that too much to ask?
Well, one of the other queries too is, I understand we have injuries and all that sort of shit, but and the VFL's not there. It's great to see Oakes improve to the extent that he has.
Look, I will blue bleed out the clacker this year that he has been an absolute fucking shining light.
Yep.
I really am eating humble pie here because I didn't think he was going to make it based on his size and a little bit of not timidness, but the fact that he didn't have the weight to throw around. But whatever he did on the off season has been phenomenal, and he is just a joy to watch each week. He's now become my go-to player. Like I can sit here and just watch a show, like the show, a game like what's the show? I suppose a game like tonight where I'm only mildly interested in what happens, but the minute I see he's near the ball, your eyes do light up to say, all right, what have you got for us, mate? And that's that
Yep.
excitement that I want to see from the rest of the playing list. It shouldn't be just him because no
Well,
one
that's
else
the
is.
thing is, I was going to say you're not getting that hopefulness from any of the other young talent.
I'll
You know,
concede, just to jump in for a second before you destroy them all. Rusco is probably second fiddle to that.
yep.
I actually like what he brings to the. He just brings a certain uncertainty to contests.
I like Roscoe. I meant sort of more players that have been there for 1-2 years, and you're hoping will take the next step and become senior parts of that side. So the guys like Callum Brown, Tyler Brown, obviously Will Kelly was injured. Uh, even guys like Appleby and all that. These are the next gen of players that you're hoping will evolve. And I'll throw in Scharenberg also, given his injury run and shit like that.
He's about
But
912 years old though now.
yeah, but in terms of, you have your established players, your side bottoms, your Pendleberries and all that. You know what you're going to get. And your first year players, okay, well, that's always going to be a mixed bag. But the guys who've been there for a few years, they're the guys who have to step up and provide the succession and lead this club into the next generation. And of those players, I'm not counting guys like Maynard, who've, again, been there for a while. Of those guys, Dacos is the only one who I really have any great hopefulness with. The only thing I'll say with Dacos is I think don't, obviously everybody, loves him because of his old man and all that. Don't fall into the trap of trying to become a highlight reel, because there was a one time where I just thought, mate, do the layoff there. And I think he went for something a little bit special and he copped it. And that was his dad's, I always say with all great players, the great players' greatest strength is they know when to go and they know when to just sort of go, no, this is the time to do the team-oriented thing. You get players who just think, oh, every time I get a possession, it's going to be a highlight. And you can't do that. So just for Josh Davis, just make sure you don't fall into the trap of trying to provide a highlight with every possession. But of those guys, he's the only one really I think, well, okay, he's giving me hope for the future. Other players,
He actually
guys like
looks
Josh
like
Thomas, Hoskin Elliott,
yeah, sorry.
have actually gone backwards, So there's a lot of guys we need to cover in terms of cultivating a list for our next premiership assault. When you got guys disappearing, and I can see like people like Josh Thomas and that, and Hoskin Elliott, they would be better in better teams. Hoskin Elliott in a really good team, if he was at Richmond, he'd kick 40 goals. And he proved that in 2018.
Yep.
He's not going to be, you're down, in a team that's rebuilding or a team that's struggling. He's not going to be the guy who's going to be kicking 4 every week. He needs to be fed the ball to do his thing. And he's not getting that.
No, agree. I think the other thing too is and we can go on this for about another 6 hours, and we will. We're 4 more games away from potential finals. Let's pretend that we're going to make finals. There's no betting in of this side at this point in the season. You should have an established lineup. Now, granted, injuries or fuck everyone over or tiredness or whatever, but we've got no. I mean, what do you think the forward line is going to look like next week? Do you think it's going to be this incarnation we had tonight?
I think they'll drop Cameron and they'll bring
Well, I think
back if he's fit.
Cameron broke his arse bone twice today by landing on it, so he'll probably be in a wheelchair for the next 6 weeks.
And the one thing I'll say to Darcy Cameron too, because obviously he listens, you're there as a forward, you're not there as a ruckman. That means when you mark the ball, every possession doesn't have to be that little handball over the top that's so symbolic of the way ruckmen play. They always do that little handball to someone running past, and he does that a lot. It's like, mate, you are playing as a forward. I want you to see you play as a forward rather than looking for the layoff all the time, because that's, again, part of the problem that I was saying earlier, that there's always that one disposal too many which just unravels the whole fucking side. I like Darcy Cameron. Like, I really like the way he moves. He really just looks like a big midfielder to me. But I think Mychek will give you a lot more flexibility and agility. So,
well, he's a walking start next week, so I think that they'll claim soreness, general arse soreness for Cameron next week. But Mychek straight in. Are we talking about next week's game now?
Yeah, we're talking
we may
about
as well.
next week.
There's no like Collingwood. There's no structure to the show. We're just making shit up as we go along.
Oh, what's new? Mychek would seem he'd have to come in. Stevenson, do you think there's anything odd about him being overlooked 2 weeks in a row? I mean, last week, from memory, he didn't get to play the scratch match because
he slept in.
Played before his drop.
I see just on him, just quietly, he's fucked off the stupid blonde hair. He's gone back to the brunette look. Maybe he's just waking up to himself. Maybe it's not all a big fucking laugh, mate, with your funny hair.
Do you think there's anything odd there?
I still think that this is a case of, based on the unbridled talent this kid had in his first year and the absurd disruption to the second year, that this has to be the fact that he is knackered because of the glandular fever. You can't be that fucking good and then forget how to play the game. I think he tries and he's creative, but he's just struggling. And it was interesting, sorry, before you interject, post-game on Foxtel tonight, they had an interview with Darcy Moore, and Gerard Healy was like a dog with a bone about why's, because they talked about a little bit about why Stevenson had not been getting games, and Moore was pretty open that his form just didn't really warrant it at the moment. He struggled to get into things at the start of the year, and he's not really been good enough to sort of essentially hold his spot, was the message I was getting from it. But at the same time, you can't go back to the scratch stuff and really recapture. For him, I don't think you can go back down there and do anything because, well, actually, no, sorry, let me rephrase this. He should be going back down there and dominating. And if he can't, then maybe it's the case of where I was getting at before, is the glandular fever stopping him completely. And the recovery from that, from what I've understand, and I understand very little if you've been listening to the show, is that these sorts of things can actually take a long time to recover from. You can be lethargic and then lacking in interest and stuff, which would pretty much marry up to what he's been demonstrating on the field. But he can still have his moments of brilliance. He can still show you what he's capable of. Again, though, I'm not a medical person, so maybe there is something about there's no sense in playing him while he's in this fatigue state because it's just going to have a longer-term detrimental effect, that maybe you just handhold him, let him do what he needs to do, get back to some form of fitness, which isn't going to happen now 4 games from the end of the season, and try and manage him into next year would be the approach. And maybe that's what they're taking. Again, I don't know. I'm speculating like the best of times, but that would seem to be the solace that I'd be finding out of this situation. Because if he's turned to absolute shit, I don't want to see another fucking early pick turn to shit.
I think
I don't think I can handle that kind of rejection.
This year, you need to take into consideration also that COVID has totally disrupted.
Maybe he's got COVID
practices. Well, he could have. At Collingwood, it's probably unlikely. It's more likely that he's got leprosy, but he would have had the glandular. He had it in the off season, and he had a interrupted preseason. And then typically what would have happened in the other season, he would have sat in the reserves probably for 1 to 4 weeks, just getting a run, getting his fitness up, and then he would have been brought back up into the seniors. But we played 1 game, and then the season was called off for 3 months. Mm-hmm. So then he was left to his own devices. So in terms of, you look at players who miss preseasons, often they struggle. Here's a guy who had a very interrupted preseason, and then his preparation was put on the back burner for another 3 months while everyone sat out of COVID.
Excuse
So he
me.
could
Speaking
be
of COVID, you made me cough.
he could be well behind where he should be in terms of
Oh,
his
no
fitness.
doubt. No doubt.
He's
Yep.
not a Pendlebury or Sidebottom who's got 10, 15 pre-seasons behind him. So, if he misses one, he can get very quickly back into the groove. So he's had an extremely interrupted year in terms of preparation. So he might just be well behind it. I don't really have an issue with any player being told you've got to work for your spot.
Yep.
But having said that, I don't think it's really helping him when he comes up and he seems to be ending up on half-back flank. I don't know if that's just he's running back there or if Buckley's using him back there. Given what we're seeing on television, it seems Buckley's using him back there, and that doesn't seem to be the best place to be getting the most out of him.
No, his first best position's in the forward line.
Oh, it's definitely.
I would have thought 2018 would have been a template for where his career was.
Oh, look, he should be eventually a midfielder, but, that's years down the track. And
so the problem is sorry, I'll just jump in for a second here. Jonathan Brown made a point tonight on the whatever that show is that they do on the couch, where he says that he's just not a contact. He's not a contested ball winner. He likes to play on his own terms, and I think that's an absolute really good description of him. He's a player that is a real burst player. He's not the sort of bloke that you're going to see in the bottom of a pack trying to win the ball. He's the one who's on the outside who's going to do something crazy and make something of a normal situation. He's almost your perfect sort of crummer in that respect as well. And I don't think he's the sort of player, and he reminds me a little bit of Josh Fraser, that as much as you can bemoan a player for his entire career that he didn't put enough bulk on, some people just can't do it, and I think that he's going to be one of them. And if that's the case, and if you can't build him up to a midfielder's physique, and I don't think he'll ever be, that solid-looking bloke, then play him to his strengths. Play him in that fucking burst role. Play him as an impact player. Whatever it takes, just play him is where he's good at. Don't try and make him to be something else. And a fucking defender is clearly the absolute worst fucking place you can play him.
Well, Buckley's got the obsession of trying to find those rebounding defenders, which is why he's got Noble in there, why he's gone to Quainer, why he's gone to Appleby, why he recruited guys like Clint Young and Jordan Russell. He wants that dashing defender who can use the ball well. And it seems that he's trying to find that in Stevenson also. So part of it, I think, is, what Buckley thinks he can get out of him. But, ultimately, players need to be played where it's best for the team at that time. Mm-hmm. Not even best for them, best for the team at that time. And this is like, the example I'd make is with De Goey. If De Goey comes back, he probably should just be stuck up forward, because that's where he's best for the team at this time, not in the midfield. And comparatively, I'll go to Peter Dacos in 1990. People forget Dacos was an elite midfielder. But in 1990, he was needed as a forward. And similarly with Gavin Brown. Gavin Brown was a brilliant wingman. He's an underrated wingman. He would have been regarded as a legend. This is a guy who won 2 medals in state games, was a fantastic winger. But because what the side needed was a key forward, he was forced to play as an undersized key forward. And that was best for that team at that time, and they won the flag. So in terms of Stevenson, at this given time, his best role would be forward.
Mm-hmm. No argument.
I should coach again. Would you retain Cameron and Cox? No, so Cameron goes out for my check.
I'd keep Coxie in there, and look, at some point, surely they're going to wave the flag with Grundy. Grundy, I thought, was a little bit better tonight. He certainly... Goldstein, I think, has been in reasonably good form from what I hear on the radio. So I think he probably won the battle tonight there. But again, now Goldstein probably suffers from the same lack of support with an under-19 side as anyone else of experience would have. But I think he was better. But you can't keep playing him week after week. I don't see what the sense of it is.
No, well, particularly with that really congested fixture that they had over that 14-day period. It's insane that this is a guy who's playing in arguably the most physical position on, in the side, where he's constantly having to go up against another giant, in ruck contests, at centre bounces and bounces around the ground and from throw-ins, and you haven't given him a rest. I actually find it negligent. And even if he was to say, hey, I'm fine, I'm fit, it's like, well, I'm not going to trust the player, because the players are always going to want to play. They 99% of the time will say, yes, I can get over the line. So you need some hard love there. And they should have done it in that 14-day period. They should have said at some point, well, you know what, we're going to give you a rest, and we'll just play Cox as the ruckman against
They should have rested him
Melbourne, or
against
whatever the case
Melbourne when everyone else took a rest.
Oh, that's a good idea. So Stevenson, would you bring back? Yes.
Yep, definitely.
Any other changes? I have no idea who we have available.
I thought probably we saw Varco's last game in the black and white, so I wouldn't persist. There's nothing to see here. Move on. I don't think Main's all that far behind. You play him for a little bit. Probably with Sidey out, Main's going to have a little bit of a role to play, but I think Varks was done. Some of his decision making and kicking today was interesting. But if that's what you're going to get out of a bloke at the end of his career, there's no point playing him. Bring a kid in. I'm all for the tank, but look, they're going to want to go out and win games. If that's the case, put somebody with a little bit more oomph.
Potentially they might not. Who would you? Anyone else you might drop? Potentially they might risk Greenwood, because it's 2 games in 6 days, and the guys come back from a knee. And usually players coming from a long layoff have the second week back. That's when they tend to struggle. But again, I don't know who else they're going to bring back. I don't know who's missing that could come back.
Yeah, and the thing is, the Blues, and I suppose we're almost talking the preview now, but the Blues are going to be a lot more harder running than North were, and whether Greenwood's going to, he started like a house on fire, but he did fade as the game progressed, which is understandable. This is his first hit out in, 12 months or whatever. I don't know whether he's going to be really of much long-term use. I love his physicality at the contest. He's a player I love to watch, because he's got a lot of what's that C word that we can't say?
Mongrel.
He cannot. He's got a lot of cannot in him, and that's, I think, something that's severely lacking from this side. And like Bucks was talking post match in the presser that it was great. The players generally love him. Well, I think a few of the players should actually aspire to be more like him as well, in the same way that he approaches things. You don't have to go out and crack skulls and be trying to kill people, but he's a sort of player who you'll never die wondering about when he hits a contest what he's gonna give his all. And I just wish there was a few more players that would put their head over the ball and hit things.
Well, it's like that really hard tackle. I think it did. It was on that North Melbourne player, Mahoney. I think it was Mahoney, whatever the hell his name is. And he sort of injured him. And it was just like a really hard tackle, which would have made a few North Melbourne players worry when Greenwood was in the vicinity. Just looking at Collingwood's list, they don't really have a lot of options. I don't know. I seriously don't know what's happening with Scharenberg, that he's fallen so far from grace. I would really love, given their midfield depth, to see them try him as a midfielder.
I think they put a line through him.
I think they have too, but given the list build and the misses and all the issues they've had, they need to find some solutions, some lateral solutions. So, if whether they're playing forward or in the midfield, I would like to see them try him. He's meant to have elite kicking and elite reading in the play, so surely that would help as a midfielder. In terms of others, you're not going to bring Lyndon Dunn back.
No.
Chris Main should surely be on the verge, but there's not a lot of players pushing up. You have Nathan Murphy, who I don't know where he's going.
Well, he was the holdover emergency this week. Seriously, what else do you have to do? When did he last play? He didn't play at all last year, did he?
Against North Melbourne, I think it was, or Port Adelaide in 2018.
You're either, again, putting a line through him, which is probably the more likelier thing, than at least, I don't know. You give him a shot, don't you?
They highly rated Murphy when they drafted him. And again, he's another one who suffered last year because he was injured and barely played. So, another one well behind on development. Then you have the draftees from last year like Trent Bianco and Jay Rantel. I don't,
Mm-hmm.
you got him. Risco's another one who they might rest. And that would just, I think he's done well, but again, he's a young kid and he's playing through this hectic schedule. And then you have a lot of names like, Keane and Tyler Brown and Tom Wilson and so forth, who are unknown. Well, Tyler Brown's an unknown quantity, but in terms of inexperience and youth, you're probably not going to bring them in for a senior player because they
No.
do need some experience. But and the selections this week really smacked of someone trying to shore up the side with some experience.
Mm.
I haven't watched Carlton for, I don't know,
10
a
minutes.
while. Yeah, probably.
You love of your life these days.
Yeah. They are a dangerous team when they can get off the leash. They have some good forwards and they have a good midfield. They're struggling with their ruck stocks. What do you think for next week, for Sunday?
Whether is this just a simple case of win or lose?
Yeah, unless
Oh,
there's something more to add.
I've seen the last win for the year, so I'm not confident. I think they'll look. We'll be competitive. I think for the next couple of weeks because we have now that understanding that we're closer to the end of the season. Then I think that they'll lift a little bit. I just don't think we have the skills set to carry it off. The first half tonight was deplorable skill wise. And what was the break? 12 days or something? You surely
9 days, yeah.
well, 9 days or whatever, you don't forget how to play in that short period of time. Now, we have a break between now and Sunday. We play Sunday afternoon. As I said last week, I think from there we then play Friday of that week against Brisbane, who are coming off a 14-day bye. Now, either that doesn't work for them, but I think it will. It'll freshen them up, and I suspect we'll be destroyed in that game. We play Carlton this week, and I don't think we'll win that. I think that it'll be close, but I don't think we'll win. And then post that, we've got Port Adelaide and Gold Coast. Again, I think Port, they're probably one of the form sides of this putrid year. I don't think we'll win against them. And Gold Coast, when they're on, they're on. They're playing some exciting football. And I think we're not good enough to contain their exciting football. I think it's a really concerning end of the season for us. I don't think we'll probably win again. I hope I'm wrong. Two schools of thought. I don't like watching us lose. I'd rather watch us win. But ultimately, again, when you're looking at where you need to be and what you've got and what you have to do, winning doesn't really suit us. Unless you can honestly put your hand up and say, I think we can win the flag this year, what's the fucking point in winning?
There'll be people who believe they can win the flag, though.
Yeah, but there's a lot of our supporter base, and there's some passionate people out there that just will live week to week and think that a win just means that we're setting up for the next dominance. I think there's a lot of realistic views out there. I've certainly seen a shift, I think, in the forums and stuff that everyone pretty much knows that we just can't do it.
Come to the end of the road.
Yep. And, if that's the case, and look, it must be hard for a competitive sporting body to put their hands up and say, well, enough's enough. Let's look forward. They obviously still think they can do it, and, good luck to them. They're about the only ones, apart from probably a smaller percentage of the supporter base than it was 2 years ago. But for the rest of us, we know what we have to do. We're willing to go through the pain of a rebuild. Then I just don't see the sense of prolonging that. Just start it now.
One of my concerns about today's performance is it's very much reminiscent of the last month of the home and away last year when we beat such stellar teams like Melbourne and Gold Coast and Essendon when they rested half the squad, and there was another one in there. I can't remember what it was. It was like, as you said earlier, they beat up on a weak kid, and it's flattering them as to where they are. Now, people can say, look at it two ways. Is it confidence building or is it deluding where you're at? And I think the next couple of weeks will show them where they stand without integral players like the Goey and Howard and all that, and how far they can go. I think without the Goey, at the very least, they can't go deep into the finals because they have such a pedestrian forward line. And the issue with that forward line too is if you go back to 208 and you had Stevenson in there and you had De Goey in there and you had Mychek doing a lot of running and you had Cox in there who was having a good season. Guys like Josh Thomas could slip under the radar. They weren't required to be the freakish forwards or anything like that because people like Hoskin Elliott were doing a lot of that sort of stuff. Now, with Hoskin Elliott struggling and De Goey not there and Stevenson not there and Cox struggling and Mychek struggling and, like, you're looking at Thomas as like, oh, well, hang on, now this guy's got to be a second forward. It's not going to happen. He doesn't have that ability. And then you have Tom Phillips playing up forward at times too. You're putting guys in there simply because you need personnel and they aren't good enough to be a premiership list or a premiership forward line. And it can very quickly fall into place because if you have a couple of, good forwards, then guys who struggle, like Josh Thomas, go from the second forward to the fifth forward and get the fifth defender. And it's like, well, you can beat that guy. But that's not happening at the moment. And they have no system and they have no system moving the ball forward. And as you said earlier, playing North today, they should have won comfortably. They struggled for half the game and then they won unconvincingly. And they're going to lose side bottom also from next week onwards. So I just don't see how we're actually going to build a side to take us anywhere near a premiership.
No, agreed. So that's it.
And
they'd probably be Sherman. Jump on board.
They'd probably be better off just giving games to guys like Bianco and Murphy and even Scharenberg, just saying,
totally.
Let's see what you got as a half forward or whatever the case might be. I know they won't do it. The problem that is going to occur is how much is COVID going to mask where they're at.
No pun intended there either.
No. Any final thoughts?
No, you're going to give a prediction for next week though?
I don't care anymore. I have not felt this sense of despair about this club
since last week.
Yeah, you're probably right. But I recall in the 203 grand final when we lost that, I was really, really disconsolate. And I was thinking, geez, if I feel like this and I just sit in the stands and drink beer, how would that team feel? And, in recent weeks...
You're like McLeod watching the wrestling at Madison Square Gardens.
And in recent weeks, it's come out that Malthouse reckons he went to the administration, said, well, this list doesn't have it in it. We need to rebuild. And 04 and 05 are just horrible, horrible years. And, they were full of injuries, full of listless performances. And every now and again, you get a little spark and think, oh, okay, there's something there. And then it'll just putter out. And I just think, I don't know. I don't know where this side's going to go. We've been on top for about 2 years. You haven't had a top draft pick. You've wasted picks on people like Woden. And, your top picks have been like 25 or something. So I'm not expecting you to find some superstar there. And it wasn't until we had those two bad years that they had access to top picks and they picked up like Daisy and Pendle. I feel like I did in 05. It's like, well, we've been on a top around there for a little while. You're probably going to get, pick 10 or I don't know if you're giving them away. I don't know if they still have it. I'm sure that Heath Shaw probably wants to come back to Collingwood to play out his career. So I'm sure whatever pick we get will be swapped to GWS.
And I don't ever prescribe to the belief that, one good year with a low pick is enough to fix everything. But you never know the spark you can get. You look at Gold Coast, Rankin and who's the other guy, and the Kings and stuff like that. They can elevate you beyond your station with just the way that they attack the game at such a young age. It can lift the rest of the list. And that's where I'm sort of hedging my bets that hopefully if we go early enough and we get someone of talent, that maybe we can be, for once we could be on the lucky side. I thought we had that with Steph. And I'm totally convinced he can get back to that type of player again. He's still fucking 8 years old or something. He's got a lot of football ahead of him and a lot of good football ahead of him. He'll come good. Yeah. But you need that spark sometimes with some of the younger blokes to reinvigorate the side, and that's where I'm looking at. I'm looking for miracles with 1 or 2 years of being a cellar dweller, but you never know what you can. The launching platform that you can build from can be phenomenally good.
Oh, look, I'm a big believer in chemistry too, in terms of the side. The side's not, the side. Any list that you put together, any team that you put together has to have the right chemistry. So if you have too many, inside midfielders, you're too slow and too plodding. So you need guys on the outside who can line break and all that sort of shit. Mm-hmm. So I'm a big believer if they find the right players and it improves the chemistry, then guys who look lost, and I'll throw Josh Thomas in there, they will suddenly look, like world beaters as they did in 2018.
Yep.
But it's all about finding that synergy in the list. And this is why I think it's worth, in the next few weeks, trying guys like Scharenberg and that in different positions, because you need these guys to come up and provide some framework that you can drop other players into. And, you go back to, I mentioned 202, 203, they weren't great sides, but they had a synergy that made them very competitive. And then come 204, 05, when they had a lot of injuries to Buckley and to Rocker and to Josh Fraser, who's probably not remembered as fondly as he should be because his first years are really good,
mm-hmm.
But when they had those injuries, then all those players who, are flankers and that sort of stuff, who looked really good in 02 and 03, started to struggle. And then come 06, when they put together a decent list again, those guys looked really good again. So
yep.
You don't always need to find world beaters. You just need to find the right players for your framework, and they will offer. They'll become the catalyst to find synergy to move forward. But, my big worry then is the list management at this side over the last, 10 years has been not inspiring.
Totally agree. All right, so we probably should wrap up now because we've been talking about 17 hours. So, who do you think? No, not who do you think? So you're going to go off on another tangent, or do you want to just tell me how much you think Carlton will beat us by this week?
Carlton by 34.
I was going to say 35.
Honestly, I just have to warn people, if it's a game where Carlton are in front from early and it looks like we're not going to get anywhere near it, there's a really good chance I won't watch it. And
fucking excellent chance on my side.
And I'll just maybe go, get a banana lounge and go sit in the COVID ward instead. It's, not something I enjoy watching. I mean, I going back 4 years ago when the AFLW started and we played our first game against Carlton, it's just like I hated losing to them, and this isn't a competition I've never, ever seen before. I know nothing about the teams and all that sort of stuff. I just cannot stand losing to Carlton.
Great.
So, Collingwood, if you're going to surprise us, then win the flag.
Yeah, well, back to reality, Greg.
Yeah. Anyway, I think unless you have any final thoughts?
Nah, fuck it.
Yep, and that's it from us. Thanks if you've made it this far. Like things and all that sort of stuff. Subscribe to us. Comment on our Facebook page, preferably, because we will see that. And we'll see you next week, or we'll talk to you next week.
Yep, I mean, generally you'd say hopefully under better circumstances, but who the fuck knows? But anyway, go Woods.
All right, later.
Catch.